our HR 2023 conclusion of the year. And with our conclusion of the year this year, we want to focus on the management structure of our generation. We want to focus on that is the processes that are being managed in our generation. And when we focus on the processes that are being managed in our generation, we focus on the requirement for every country in our generation to form part of the business in our generation itself. And with forming part of the business of our generation itself, we learn that our generation are structured in a certain way, right? And with our generation being structured in a certain way, our generation and every country has got processes that are inclusive or that are really depriving to another, right? So it's that the processes in our generation, and I'm going to explain it based on my human resources experience, right? My human resources officers, my career history, right? My history in employment itself, and where I started at being a bartender many years ago. And when I started in the employment industry many years ago, I was in secondary school, right? And I started my very first job as a bartender at one of the hotels. And one of the hotels had a European manager, right? And not European, African, European, how do we used to call white African, right? And while we were employed in the office, there were a group of people, a group of teachers who always used to attend the bus. They always used to come and order whatever they require. And then there were your group of public people, and there were sometimes your white people that would enter the bar, right? And then I've learned the requirement for our generation and for countries to restructure itself based on what our generation requires and what our generation finds themselves being challenged with. Restructuring is something that you do once a year, right? And I want to focus today on our generation's education. So if you listen into our discussions that I've had and how I've educated our generation through the office structure, the processes that needs to be structured in office itself, and in our generation itself, that includes the society in general, that includes processes that are everyday community initiative processes, that are sometimes your businesses in your communities, that are sometimes not recognized by governmental functions, that are sometimes your church businesses that has to be registered, that includes processes that people want to manage and call a new world order. And RESTRUCTURING ELISE, but your explanation of a new world order and how our generation are being structured are two different things, right? In RESTRUCTURING ELISE, I understand the fact that a generation of people want to manage the world in business itself, and want to manage every process in the community as a business process, right? So that everyone in the community are being provided for, right? And I learned that while the structure, while there was a requirement for our generation to be structured in a certain way, there was the implementation process of that. And while there was implementation process of it, there was information that went hayward and bayward, right? So information that went all over the place in our communities, especially in South Africa. So South Africa has got a whole group of processes that I'm just going to explain everyone through. While I was employed in South Africa, right, I was employed at Nibblybits, a biscuit factory, and I was employed at Bull and Build It, and I was employed at Oostenburg Lodge, and I then finally were employed at Sales Hire, Cape Town, and I then Sales Hire Pero area, and I then came to New Zealand after that and found myself in offices in New Zealand, right? So while I was in South Africa employed, there were certain processes that RESTRUCTURING ELISE explains, like I explained the New World Order, right? New World Order to a generation of people can mean a whole lot of things, but to RESTRUCTURING ELISE, it means the requirement to set the world in a way that everyone forms part of the houses that are being provided for, and so that the disadvantaged group also have a way of being provided for in a generation itself, right? So what I want everyone to listen to is not that you look at certain countries today and you have processes in South Africa and you have processes in New Zealand and you have processes in Europe, and then you have countries in poverty that doesn't realize how those processes are managed and how everyone in the world forms part of that. That is the management structure of the world in general. Some of those processes are the SARS VIP payroll function, right? I'm going to explain it in a simple way. It's a payroll process. It's a system that captures and that retrieves information of all the employees. It holds information of all the businesses, right, that are registered under government, and therefore keeps record of everyone's fundings, right? The basic salary, the company structure, how are the companies structured and how are the companies set out, and also that sometimes can make place for how countries are provided for. So I've explained it in one of my videos before, and I've mentioned that it's a payroll function, but I believe that RESTRUCTURING ELISE, it's when I'm going to mention something that South Africa mentions and says that it's the BEE, right? It's a process where I form part of the BEE, and the next organization forms part. We make business with one another, and everyone in the country are provided under that structure. And those structures are not necessarily only meant to be South Africans' processes or structures, right? Those structures are meant to be provision for a generation of countries that needs to be provided for. So it's simple processes, but under those processes, people form part of the business itself. Businesses support one another itself based on companies that are registered under the BEE. And therefore, the BEE is not only explained and should not only have been explained to the South African people. And I know there's New Zealanders that has their different processes that are similar to the BEE, and that countries are even managed in that same way, that they make business with one another. When one company buys into SARS, SARS is the main payroll function of the country itself, and the one country makes business with the next country because they both use a SARS, right? And then the BEE goes the same. BEE is Black Economic Empowerment, right? But we're not talking about the terminology BEE. RESTRUCTURING ELISE explains the process and the structure that forms part of the BEE process, right? So in South Africa, the terminology stands for, it's exactly for Black and for women empowerment in employment, and for non-white, white advantages, for people that have been disadvantaged for years. But when we look in the international explanation and requirement for the international world to work under processes that are structured in a way that the BEE process makes provision for people that are the disadvantaged group in the world, that forms part of that, that when businesses look at businesses that are registered under the BEE function or under the BEE organizational process or structure, then businesses makes business the one with the other. And that's what our generation needs. So that's the management structure that our generation in international level, because remember, countries who makes business and who buys into SARS maybe from a Chinese group, and the Chinese groups make business with New Zealand, they make business with the Europeans, they make business with South Africa, they make business with some American countries, and from the SARS VIP group, they manage certain processes in certain ways, they manage their church functions in certain ways, they manage the international sports under the SARS payroll function. It's one process. It's like RESTRUCTURING says, I've been employed in the HR office, but the process was not only an employment, right? The process was not only being in Nibbly Bits in the office, but the process includes so much international business, business cooperation, where businesses cooperate and work with one another, and where businesses fund one another. And those are certain processes and systems that needs to be explained to the international world in general, to countries that find themselves today depriving because they do not make business under certain functions and processes that includes every one of humanity, right? And therefore, it really would be advisable for the world to once a year not re-evaluate, but to once a year, we called it an audit system, right? Once a year, ELISE was it Niblibits, and I was an auditor myself, and I had to do I had to do product audits and not financial audits, and in human resources, our structured audits, and you then learn that the requirement for those audits to be met once a year, right? The requirement for a generation of people to structure the business in the world in such a way that countries do not find themselves in poverty, and countries really do not find themselves abused by it. And I really just had to explain everyone through that, because that's what I want to focus on with concluding the year with HR 2023 today. And I know where I'm at, I sometimes explain a lot, right? But I require people who manage business in the world and who find themselves challenged with all the requirements that relates to managing business, to listen exactly to everything that RESTRUCTURING in the videos explains, and to listen to how are the structured processes in where business managers and business owners find themselves at. It is one thing for our generation to give an opinion on certain discussions, but it's another thing for someone else's opinion that sometimes are a requirement for our generation to have ourselves listened to. We structured in a way that we sometimes find ourselves managing the process in a managerial way, or are we structured in our generation in a way that sometimes have the processes all over the place, right? And AWOKH Passion explains how all over the place can sometimes look on my AWOKH Passion page. And by leading this generation discussion, I explain our generation, how all over the place in our generations discussions can look, and how humanity's way of management can sometimes be different. Some countries find themselves being more disadvantaged than the next. The 50% poverty and the 50% billionaire state of our generation, and the requirement for our generation to learn when processes in our generation is structured in a way that every one of our generation find themselves being part of what RESTRUCTURING calls the management structure of a generation. Then it makes it more easier to have countries that find themselves disadvantaged be provided for, and be in that forms part of our generation's economical economy, right? So the economy doesn't only include the business itself. The economy includes the people also. And when you listen to, and I did economics in secondary school, and I did economics in Boland College when I studied human resources. And when we form part of the economy of our generation, we form part of when the business owner makes a decision, and when the decision are really that provides also for RESTRUCTURING in the room, that listens to RESTRUCTURING is part of the business office team, and not our office team in the business, but part of the community itself, right? RESTRUCTURING is now residing in New Zealand, and RESTRUCTURING forms part of the economy of New Zealand. So New Zealand accounts for RESTRUCTURING ELISE being a person, being a citizen in New Zealand, or an employee or resident or a community member. And when we look at the world in general as the people being part of the economical terminology of the economy of the world, right? So when we look at that, then we listen to a generation that listens to providing for a generation of people. It is the terminologies and how we structure our generation, and how the world is required to be structured to have the world being provided for. It is one thing to say that the business and the economy of the world only includes the office, and only includes the office workers, and only includes the restaurant. But today we learned, someone has seen the news reading the other day of the safe operating standards, right? That another business are really preparing and really preparing for the community to really feel fine and safe in the restaurant itself. And when we learn that part of the economy is the person who goes to the restaurant, the person who goes to the store, the person who goes to the grocery store, the person who goes to the market, who scans their bank card, they are part of the economy of the world in general. And when we listen to how the process of the economy of the world should be managed in a way that the international sports teams work with businesses that works under the SARS process, works with South Africans that works under the BEE process, and South Africans who works with international process, people who works with SARS processes. But in South African terminology, the BEE processes forms part of certain countries that find themselves out of poverty. And that's where the BRIC comes in, right? Where they are really and that they are wanting to make business, the one organization and business owner with the other. So that forms part of the international sports. It forms part of the education systems and processes in countries. It forms part of the function of humanity, of how humanity are being managed in countries. It forms part of governmental management processes, and it also forms part of the different church groups and denominations. And that's the processes that all, when we look at businesses and we learn that certain businesses are there in certain countries doesn't have those businesses. And then we learn that when countries buy into the SARS process, we are not advertising for SARS VIP, but the world makes business with people who makes business with one another. The world is just like that. And those processes and the BEE process in South Africa, if you read on the terminology of the BEE processes, and how the BEE processes are being managed in South Africa, and then you listen to how the world makes business, the one business owner and organization with the other. In South Africa, in human resources, I worked on SARS VIP. In New Zealand, in human resources, they've got the SARS, right? The SARS payroll function. And yeah, so it's countries that buys into certain businesses. And I've mentioned before that the businesses were actually meant for the international business owners and for every country in general. But I've learned that it is a way of the requirement of a generation of people that wants to educate countries to work under one process. So they are not setting countries out of those processes because they want countries to be disadvantaged, not necessarily. They are setting countries out of those processes because they want countries to buy in to how they manage office in the world in general. It is how they lock REBEA out, and I really wanted to do HR 2023 on my Facebook page, right? For my Facebook listeners, now I have to share the video to them. And I really wanted the video to be available for those people who have listened in on Facebook to our monthly discussions. And it is that some people require REBEA to on a time when I said I'm gonna be on Monday morning, then people require REBEA to be on Monday morning doing an HR 2023. And the world is different, and we can't really tell ourselves that we are not gonna want to work on a process of someone who works somewhere else. It is that we say that when you make business with REBEA ELISE, then REBEA ELISE makes business with you. And it is the same education, it is the same management structure, but it is a requirement for our generations to learn that you don't lock the Facebook account because you want REBEA when she said on Monday to be on Facebook on Monday, but you learn that REBEA's management requirement and structure is that when you require REBEA to really provide the information that I educate on my business pages, and then you really allow yourself to listen to the management structured process that REBEA ELISE are educating. And that means you contact the person itself, you contact the business owner, whether it's a small business owner, whether it's REBEA ELISE, whether it's my AWOKH business years, or whether it's another company or another organization that you learn from on social media. And you learn to contact the people, and you learn to make business with the country itself, and you learn to then work in one that our generation finds themselves in. That is the management structure of our generation in general. And it is not different. Another thing that we are going to discuss, I'm just going to have a little bit of a break, and then we're going to continue with this discussion. I'm going to discuss another option that I've mentioned to everyone. And when I say I'm going to discuss the cash option in the credit function of the world. that process, what I require people who manages those processes, what I require the world that sometimes find themselves so challenged, and then they say that they really do not have funds to provide. Then we learn that there are certain things that has been invented and implemented, and that's called the creative function of the world. And it was not invented for the world to hold on to the abuses and the povertyness of the cash function of the world. It is for the world to generate credit in an easier way and to learn to work on credit in certain processes and to learn to work on cash in certain processes. And I'm going to quickly explain everyone through that, because we're going to work on that next year when we start the year fresh. So when it comes to the credit function and the cash function of the world, the cash function is what the world always were really working on, right? And the credit function has been implemented years ago, but more and more the credit function are being advanced. And while the credit function of the world are being advanced more, the credit function of the world is a requirement that when Bitcoin implemented and invested into Bitcoin invested into the education of the world that needs to move to the credit function to make provision for everyone in the world to be provided for. So when we look at the credit function of the world, it makes it much more easier for humanity to financially hold on to that. That is rather than working with the environmental products, right? That you require certain countries to work with their greens and vegetations and all of that on their own, but to make the world in one part of the economy of the world itself, and to make all the countries and every human being part of Earth itself, to make all of them part of the economy of the world in general. And it's not a difficult process for countries who find themselves disadvantaged and for the third world countries to form part of that the world calls the credit function of the world. The credit function of the world are more easily explained in real estate businesses. In real estate businesses, the credit function of the world are explained to a certain way, other than the person who pays the monthly mortgage that pays with cash, but the real estate has the funds available as credit, and the real estate makes the house bond amount of money available in the credit function and the credit part of the world. The only difference I've written last week between the credit function, between the cash function flow of the real estate business, is the business owner that finds themselves is the employee that maybe is RESTRUCTURING ELISE, and RESTRUCTURING ELISE pays the bond and once a month, and the bond goes cash into real estate. And real estate is the credit function, but the bond goes cash into real estate, right? And RESTRUCTURING ELISE's salary are then going cash into real estate, meaning that real estate need to hand the cash of the cash of the debit of RESTRUCTURING ELISE that were paid and to the real estate credit function, need to pay it to the cash part of the country or of the world in general. So there's the cash part, there's the credit part. The real estate, when they pay the amount, let's say RESTRUCTURING pays $1,000 house bond cash that RESTRUCTURING earned with a cash salary, that is a monthly business salary, and then that goes to the cash bank of the world, and the cash bank of the world gives the real estate business 1,000 credits again. Let's say the real estate owner wants to accredit cash from the cash bank that they now are managing the real estate business, and they now want to accredit some cash from the cash bank. The cash bank then gives the real estate cash into the real estate, the cash bank then gives the real estate owner the amount of cash that the real estate owner requires, and the real estate owner and the cash bank again receives cash from the World Bank in general of the amount of cash that they have paid to the real estate owner. So it gets a little bit, let me say what the word was, not technical. It doesn't get technical. I've mentioned it before. The only problem with dealing with the cash owner that's working with a real estate business that now either receives his monthly salary in cash, and that's the only cash probably that he can receive from his real estate business, because the real estate business forms part of the credit function of the world. and he gets 100% of his salary in cash and 100% of his real estate business salary in credits. And then it makes it easier on humanity that works on credit processes in certain countries, because nowadays credit is in your restaurants, credit is in your grocery stores. You get a credit function in a whole lot of processes in our generation, that the cash function and the credit function and the cash business of the world and the credit business of the world makes it more easier for everyone in the world to be part of the economy of the world in general. The only technical issue is that the cash that are being paid from someone's employment goes into a credit option function of the world. And when that credit option function of the world retrieves the cash of the employee, then that amount needs to go to the cash bank. You may remember, because the credit bank of the world has got billions of dollars of credits available that forms part of the housing provision of the world. In the housing provision, the business owners' premises provisions are all being paid under credits, and the employee, the people, forms part of the cash function of the world most of the time. And the credit processes needs to stay in the credit function of the world, and the cash processes, that is the humanity, the society in general, needs to stay part of the cash processes and functions of the world. That is your businesses that pay salaries with cash. And that is your stores nowadays forms part of so much credit functions and credit facilities that it becomes easier for stores to be managed under the credit function, unless only they pay employees with cash. And therefore, it makes it easier for the households and for the businesses that are being owned, and for certain processes to be managed under the credit function of the world. And those are processes that RESTRUCTURING wants everyone to work on. It's not difficult. We want to discuss it a little bit more next year, because we really feel that the process of how the credit function of the world and the cash function of the world should be managed can be a bit more easier on humanity. And it can be not so, and the processes on how the credit functions should be managed can be a bit more advantaged, right, to humanity, rather than depriving humanity out while managing those processes. Yes, so this is what I've mentioned. So in the casino, they explain the credit function of the world. I remember I used to go to Grand West Casino, right, a lot. And there I was explained the cash function of the world and the credit function of the world. You give your cash into the credit bank, and the credit is on the card. With the credit card, you can pay another credit card that you call a American Swiss credit card. No, with credits that you nowadays can go and buy food at the restaurant. With credits that you now can go and pay. Companies can give, business owners can give their employees a credit by one time of the year. And I've also thought of a very good initiative, and that is certain businesses that can pay salaries only under the credit function of the world, right? Certain businesses that makes credit available, and certain banks that work with that process, and the bank then knows that this business's employees only work on credit. They get paid credits, and their credits they can use at restaurants. It's on a normal ASB bank card, and you get paid. You can go to restaurants with it. You can go to the market with that has the ATM available, and it becomes part of the normal process of the world, right? It makes it easier for people that are unemployed, and it makes it easier for the AI processes, right? System-generated financial funding processes that can really learn to economically fund countries, right? So rather than the world saying that the world is out of cash money and the cash flow of the world is really, really, really exhausted, then the world can find themselves, generating money via technology, right? Software programs, and the world can economically work on those programs so that the world can make economically provision for countries that find themselves disadvantaged, and it becomes more easier for countries. Yes, and then when you're at the casino, you give your credit, your card, and your card has 1,000 points, and you can buy your coffee with the card. You can book sometimes in with the card or with the digits. You can give the cash out, and it becomes credit, right? And certain hotels and restaurants only can work with those credit processes. 50% of the restaurant processes are credit, and 50% requirement are cash handling requirements. And those are processes that I want initiatives that we know everyone are working, understand those processes to make it easier for humanity, right? To get humanity out of that, that humanity is sometimes so much in war about the financial state of the world. And then the world can really work on processes that are the accreditation credit function of the world, businesses that forms part of the credit function of the world, and that only runs on credit. People that are employed there knows they're only getting paid in credit, but with their credit it becomes money in the bank. You can retrieve only a maximum of $1,000 of your $2,000 in cash, right? Or $500 of your $2,000 in cash. The other funds in that, the 1,500 you can use at your grocery store. You can go to a restaurant. It's the same as an ASB card, but it's the credit function of the world. And certain businesses know and employees know that we form part of when we are employed in that business employs and pays funds out in the card function. That is the credit process of the world. And that's where we want everyone to work on and to earnestly find themselves discussing. And to earnestly find themselves discussing, because it makes it easier for the world to discuss matters that are everyone, the economy of the world is becoming more and more easier. Some people say they go on computer and they retrieve funds from the computer, and the computer directly funds the fund into the bank, into the real estate businesses. And that process we need in certain businesses, in certain processes in countries. Remember, remember humanity knows that the funding is available on real estate businesses in an easy credit way. But now we're moving from that we say the same credit process we now need in different businesses in the world also, rather than only under the real estate processes, where the real estate funds that they retrieve from the World Bank are retrieved from a certain database, from a certain system, right? Software process, and the money are retrieved, and the money is available, and the money is always in the bank. It makes it easier for the world to find themselves managing different processes under the same real estate function and under the same real estate fund handling process. It's fund handling, it's not cash handling, it's funds in the bank. And normally you just go and you pay with a card, and it becomes and it remains funds in the bank. I know I've said a lot, and I had to say a lot because we really want to we really want to work on that. I've just mentioned that now the real estate bank funding program and credit function needs to be available in certain parts of humanity itself. When it comes to restaurants, we want restaurants to also 50% of the restaurants ownership form part of the process that real estate businesses are being managed on. So let's say I go and I pay with my bank card, then it becomes part of where the world learns to manage the credit function differently and the cash function differently. The credit processes differently, the cash processes differently. And once we listen to what we are trying to explain when it comes to the cash handling, and when it comes to easily retrieving cash and easily making cash available to countries and easily making the credit business options available to countries, right? It's a lot of businesses that when you buy into Sarge VIP, you buy into that credit function, that credit process, and that credit process makes it easier for countries to have funds. For countries like New Zealand, people get paid on a monthly basis. They go and the money stays in the bank. The money rotates in the country, and people go to the restaurant on a monthly basis. People pay their house bond up. The house bond gives the cash amount to the cash bank, and the credit amount people pay on a credit basis, and it becomes easier, and the country is not so much in poverty because of the difference between the cash handling and the credit handling processes. And between that, the what South Africa calls the BEE process, there's different terminologies in different countries. It is now not necessarily BEE process in New Zealand, but it's business owners that makes business under certain functions and under certain processes. That becomes also very easier to manage and very easier to handle and very easier for countries to not be in poverty, because there's always that is funds are always available. We're gonna start 2024 with the option of the cash handling and the credit handling. We want to really have our generation move that they are so much abused because of the management of those processes and because of how those processes should be structured, right? So what we want everyone to do is to listen to everything that REBEA has said. We took a break between that now, and we want everyone to listen next year and where we are at, because we are going to continue very fiercely. You heard my video was very fierce and it was very direct, and I really do not play about it. And that's how we're going to be next year with managing all of those processes. And no people are going to say, but we are working at those processes again. But what REBEA educates in the book business, if it's so all over the place, then it sometimes looks disruptive. And if we can manage it in one structured process, then it would be fine for humanity in general. That's all that I wanted to say today, everyone. Have an amazing day further.